What is going on, everyone? Alex Tanner here for Talking Shop with Outlier Firefighters podcast, episode number 45. I am here with Captain Pete Mensching of the Northbrook Fire Department. He taught my company fire officer class. He's over at NIPSTA running that program still. And we're going to talk a lot about training and company officer type things. As always, if you're here live, ask questions. He's an open book. Pete, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk with you, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And, we were green rooming before, and you guys, sometimes I feel like whoever listens to this, it'd be fun to hear some of those green rooms, but you guys are in for a treat. It's going to be a good one. So first things first, let's just get into your first exposure of the fire service.
Yeah, I'm officially a legacy firefighter. My father was a volunteer firefighter with the Itasca Fire Department. His dad, my grandfather, was the fire chief there for, I think, 25 plus years. And this was back in the volunteer days. So I think they had the 911 phone call or the phone hanging up in the kitchen type deal. And the whistle would go off at the station and they all go back. Didn't really know much about the history. My family never really talked about it. The only thing I ever knew is that my dad's claim to fame was he crashed one of their brand new fire trucks, and it was a pretty serious accident. He ended up in the hospital. It was right after my parents got engaged. It was way before me, and so that was really the family history that I was exposed to. So not much, but probably more recency was. I have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me, and I don't know what started his interest, and I actually never asked him, but he would start going down. We grew up in East Dundee, and we would hang out at the East Dundee Fire Station, and it was doing all the stuff that we hate to do now, like testing hose and washing fire engines, and I'm a 7, 8 year old kid, doing that, and it's the coolest thing in the world. And a lot of the people that worked down at that fire house were, people in my church, parents of kids that I went to school with. I mean, I was in school with the fire chief's son, and fast forward then, the next exposure I could remember was my next door neighbor joined the fire department, and he had a old Le Mans with pretty heavy duty exhaust, and when the car would fire up in the middle of the night, like at 3 a.m, and my room was right next to the driveway, I knew that, the fire department had a call because it was all call back, and the blue light would go on, and I'd see him race down the hill, and then 5 minutes later, you see a fire engine come back up. So those were my first exposures to the firehouse, all pretty much volunteer, community-based fire service stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. And same boat, right? I there's something to be said about that exposure to, especially the community, fire department, and being part of it.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, I mean, like my brother and I think it was cool. At one point in our career, we both got to work at East Dundee together. He was my captain, I was a firefighter. And I mean, that was, from all through grade school through, when I started there, that was where I could see my, working my whole career in that fire station type thing. And, because I didn't know there was a whole world outside of, East Dundee at the time. So
that's cool. So I'm assuming that's where you first started then, right? Was East Dundee?
Yeah, it didn't work out the way I planned. I actually got hired. Algonquin, Lake of the Hills, was my first opportunity. A lot of different ball game back in 2000 is we actually took a test for part-time. I mean, there was such a demand for positions that I had to take a pre-employment test and physical, and we did like the combat challenge, and we got ranked. And I had put in applications in all over the place, and Algonquin, one of my friends had told me, hey, check out this place, and it just worked out. They sent me to Fire 2 school up in McHenry County, and, as luck would have it, then, I got started up there, and then about 6 months later, but June or July of that year, the fire chief from East Dundee called me and said, hey, we got a spot for you too here. And so I did the dual part-time thing for, almost 4 years. So that was, couldn't do it enough, basically. So.
Yeah. And then from there, did you go straight to Northbrook?
Yeah. So, I managed to get in medic school pretty early on. So I had a lot of opportunities. So I owe a lot to those part-time places between Algonquin and East Dundee. Um, they sent me to paramedic school pretty quick, and I was testing the whole time. So, from 2000 end of 2000, I was pretty much of age to start accepting jobs, and yeah, I got hired in Northbrook on a whim, fall of 2003. So, and I've been there ever since. So,
That's great. So through there, you're a captain now.
yeah.
What was your progression to get to that? And how long were you in each rank? And what did you do to
Okay.
get through all that?
Yeah, it's my story. I think I tell it a little better now during COFO, but my story is I was going to be a blue shirt for life at Northbrook. I was very intimidated by my peers. I worked with a lot of great firefighter paramedics that I just remember walking in the door at Northbrook and just being like, where am I? I felt like I was straight out of an IFTA manual. Like people were so squared away. One of my first exposures was we did a critique on a fire that a shift had gone to, and it sounded like a book report. It was so like it was just so business-like and professional, and I'm like, this is not what I'm used to. Was not what I was used to. So, and I was just like, man, I want to be a good firefighter. That's it. And so I really kind of just concentrate on firefighter stuff, and it never really crossed my mind to be an officer. I did take the officer classes early on, just to see, kind of more just to audit and just see if it was interesting. But I really like the challenges of being a firefighter paramedic, and I had that deal where I ended up working with my best friend. I had a great company officer, and my shift commander was the best on the department, and life was good. And then uh, my mentor he retired, and as you know, when someone retires, a lot of change happens. And my best friend had taken the lieutenant's test, and his number got called, and so my perfect world just got blown up, and I went from working for the best company officer in the world with my best friend and having a really good setup to I wasn't really as satisfied with the way things were, and it was kind of like, okay, I want to be in control of what I'm doing. So it was, I think it was in 14. So I was kind of a young guy at the time, 11 years on, and I took my first test. Um, and I got promoted with about 7 days to spare in 17 to lieutenant. Spent 3 years as a lieutenant, and then in December of 20 got promoted to captain. So.
Very cool.
Um, and in between that, I had an opportunity. One of the things that actually helped me with the testing was training. Our department had opened up a 7G program where I became the assistant training officer, helping out with the training officers. So I did that for about 6 years, from 15 to 20, 21 or 22, I forget. But yeah, so I mean, like training kind of always is run parallel in everything, whether it was just being a firefighter paramedic and, you know, throughout being an officer, that was a springboard to being an instructor at NIPSA, all that stuff. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Leanhart says, "What's up?" By the way.
oh, hey Chris, how you doing, man?
So how did you end up then getting involved with the company fire officer program over at NIPSTA? Like, for obviously not everyone that listens to this is in our area,
Yeah.
but Northbrook and NIPSTA are next door to each other, and obviously that's not necessarily the way, but there's a lot of exposure between the two of those. How did you end up over there, and how did you get into that position?
Yeah, so I've been an instructor over at NIPSA since 2012. I originally started with the BOF Academy. Ken Cordover brought me over. We had known each other from our working in Division Three. We did some maybe Division Three instructing, and we actually brought Division Three brought Rid Under Fire's our version of Rid Under Fire to Division Three after a bunch of us had taken that class, and we exposed the division to those concepts and everything, and that was before NIPSTA was even formed. And then slowly it kind of came to be. And I ran into Ken on a whim once, and he's like, "Hey, why aren't you here?" We had taught together during those drills. And I said, yeah, I'd love to be here. And so I got started at the academy, and then so I did that for a while. I love it. I still love working at the academy. And then when I got promoted to lieutenant, we NIPSA had just taken over doing its own fire officer programming before. I believe one of the organizations, either the I Chiefs or IFSRI, was kind of like contracting out those classes. And NIPSA decided they were going to use their own instructors. And he had asked me, like, hey, would you ever be interested in teaching company officer after I got promoted? And I'm like, and I remember telling him, I'm like, I'm a brand new lieutenant. I'm like the junior person on my crew. Like, I'm dealing with, like, I got, like, senioritis. I have this issue. I have this issue. I'm like, what do I have to offer? And he's like, that's exactly why you need to teach. And I'm like, okay. So I came in, gave it a whirl and everything like that. And then the program coordinator at the time, Scott Exo, was looking to move into other areas at NIPSA, and Ken was like, hey, would you be interested in doing the coordinating thing? And I'm like, well, no, you can find someone else. And he's like, no, I really like you. And I'm like, okay, I'll try it out. And it was June of 2020. And he's like, yeah, just go to orientation, and like, here's all the material or whatever, and just I'll help you out with whatever. And I remember showing up to orientation expecting to see Ken, and he's not nowhere to be found. And I call him, I'm like, hey, are you going to be here? He's like, nope, you got it. And like, so Ken was just a guy that would walk me up to the ledge. He knew that I wouldn't want to fail, and just pushed me off, because I went kicking and screaming, and I wasn't really excited about running the COFO program. No one wanted to teach the COFO program. Um, I'll be honest, it's a lot easier to teach candidates because they have to be there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And try and get fired up about officer programming. I didn't. It was very hard at first to get instructors that were interested and get people interested in the program. So, but now it's become one of my favorite things to do, because we end up just just like everything in life, you chase rabbit holes and you get to explore different things. And we haven't created new problems. We just repackaged them in different ways. And it's more of a workshop than a class, and I think I'm stealing, because I get more out of sitting in that room with, 30 future fire officers. I get more from them than we could ever give back to them. And it makes me better every day. So it's been a great experience.
Yeah, some of the things that I enjoyed was the whole group discussion parts, because yes, like every class that involves a certification, there are people that are in it just for that. But those people usually end up quiet in the background somewhere. And then, at least from a student perspective, the people that really do actually want to be there and get something out of it, all of a sudden they just latch together and start having conversations and start doing stuff. Like, and there's opportunity for that. And I think those are important things with that type of class, right? Is having, people discuss, similar to like an LDDM type thing, where you're discussing your beliefs as a fire officer and what would you do in this situation, and you pick up so many different things. Do you remember my class had the guy from Cicero?
Oh yeah,
and it was like, yeah, we'd take a guy out back and we'd beat him, and it's like, well,
Teddy Polshek.
Yeah, Teddy, yeah. And it was just so cool to have him in the class, because it was so great, like, to hear a different perspective. And those guys are what they are and how they are, but and we'll kind of get into him, maybe not him specifically, but one thing he brought in one of the questions later. But yeah, the group discussions are always great, and everybody's chasing live fire for everything all the time. But
and he added that perspective, because as I remember, he's a very senior, seasoned, and firefighter just in general, with, I think, one of the most senior guys in the room. And there was a lot of aspiring in your class, if I remember right. And it was just good. It was a good balance, because like, who better to learn from than a guy sitting next to you that's willing to share his experiences? Because, like, it's just like being a parent, like, I could sit there all the time and no one's going to listen to me, but you might listen to your friends, and that guy brought a lot every day. And I mean, that's the best, is when we don't have to say anything, and you guys work it out amongst yourselves. It's one of the because it's just you're around firefighters that want to fix stuff,
Yeah.
do it right.
Yeah.
So
People are all going to have different opinions, and then it almost like even with him, and what he grew up through in terms of Cicero, like when he heard alternative ways of handling things, you could tell that, like, okay, he was going to add that into his repertoire. He might use that at
yeah,
some point, just like how sometimes places we might use a blanket party once in a while because we've learned about it. Like it was a cool aspect. I'm sure that's not. I mean, that's not really curriculum. That's what you guys decided to do with it, and I personally enjoyed that. I don't know about
yeah.
everyone, but I personally enjoyed that.
Well, there's no non-stolen ideas in the fire service, and the COFO program at NIPSTA is definitely unique in what we do there compared to any other program in the state. And that came out of the mind of Ken Korber. What Ken had done, um, I, you know, we've all sat through the FO1 series where it's 5 classes of 40 hours of PowerPoint where you're listening to retired chiefs telling you how it was like, many years ago, how to be a company officer, and there wasn't any relevancy. And so he had created a standalone course kind of based on IFSI's Fireground Company Officer.
Yeah.
We called it at NIPSTA Hands-On Company Officer. And then when OSFM switched the format from FO1 series to the COFO, we incorporated all the hands-on company officer aspect into COFO. And that's why during phase 2, we're out there, we're trying to do drills, we're trying to do hands-on, we're trying to do non-traditional learning. Group at the worst, it's like group discussions. At the best, it's you are leading candidates into live fire.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's some guys will walk away from it and say, hey, it was pretty good, and other guys will be like, that was dumb. But I mean, I could say even on your worst day, you weren't sitting in the classroom for 8 hours, looking at a PowerPoint. So.
Yeah, I mean, I got practical experience and personally being a RIT supervisor, like, you know what I mean, under live fire. Like, we had a legit, like, well, not legit, but it was part of the training. Like, you don't get, I think I got to be incident commander twice. Like, those are just things that the volume of people that it takes to do that and blending it with the candidates was a really cool experience. It allowed that opportunity to happen.
Yeah, it's unique that we're able to do what we can do there. So, and all we do, and now I'm splitting the program with Battalion Chief Ryan Hughes from Highland Park.
Oh yeah,
because we got to keep the secession going, and he's got his ideas, so he's taken the program. He runs phase 2 basically now.
Okay,
and he's taking it in new and awesome directions. It's awesome. So. And a lot of it has to do with the instructor cadre that we have. I go to NIPSA every day, and I'm just in awe of the people I get to work with and what I get to learn. And if you could be in a room with Jim Theobald, Ryan Hughes, Alex Nunez for a day, how can you not be better after that day? It's just awesome to be able to work with those people, and what they bring to our program or to the programming there is, it's just amazing. And, and I think sometimes it's not taken by students that as humble as they are. Like, a lot of people take whatever they're saying as, oh, they're just saying this is the way it is. And I think it's going back to those discussions. It's like, no, this is just another way, consider it, or just another perspective. And that's, I think, how we get better. It's just listening to new ideas and figuring out what the best solution is for you. I only know how to. I only know the lay of the land at Northbrook, for instance. I can only speak to our issues, our culture, and our rules. And everyone else has, a whole different set of stuff. So there's only so much I can, only so much perspective I can give in a certain situation. But other people might be facing what you're facing, and I think that's a better way to go. You know?
Yeah. Every organization, as much as we like to say same circus, different clowns, every organization's different. It's got their own, positives and negatives, which as a leader changes the way you have to do things, right? And
absolutely. You gotta know the rules. You gotta know the rules.
Yeah.
So then you know how to bend them and break them, or which ones that you know are immovable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the art.
Yeah. A collared shirt might be the worst thing in one place and be
Hmm.
nothing somewhere else, right? And
Yeah,
you got to learn what games to play, I guess, when you get in a leadership spot. So,
yeah, yeah. Knowing the rules and knowing who your boss
no.
is going to be the big thing, and knowing what things that your boss wants explained to him, and knowing other things that like he's not going to want to even hear anything about how we did whatever.
No.
And so those are the things that are the thou shalt nots, and there's the other ones that are it doesn't leave this room, and and you just act accordingly.
No.
So
So, who would you say, we're kind of circling back a little bit, but in the beginning of your career, was there somebody or a group of people that really influenced you a lot? And maybe you got a chance to say thank you, maybe you didn't, but I always like trying to ask this question because it really exposes how important those first relationships are in the fire service.
yeah, mine's pretty easy, and in my new orientation for COFO. I make mention of this person now because I ask all my students for their why they're taking that class, and I have to give them my why. And my why is the story I just told you. Is that my shift commander for 11 years, who became our deputy chief at Northbrook, retired, and he went to a department out by me out here out west to basically, have more time with the family and the wife and all that stuff. And it was really, really great. And that was Bob Brogan. Bob was my shift commander for 11 years. And what I learned about Bob is um, Bob was a chief that he was like the first chief that I'd have to say, in my experience, treated me like a human as a firefighter. When I started, we had, I don't know how much it's like this anymore, but like it's kind of like the chiefs. If you had chief in your title, you did no wrong. And um, my interactions with chiefs were never really all that positive. And I remember I came in, I was doing my paperwork or processing. I had to drop some paperwork off, and that was the first time I met Bob Brogan on the bay floor of Station 11. And he's like, "Hey, who are you?" And I'm, Pete Mensching. He's like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Did I do something wrong? Did I park in the wrong?" And I was like, "Yeah." He just asked me everything about it. He's like, about myself, and he's like, "Where do you live?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Dundee." And he's like, "You probably don't know where that is." And he's like, "No, I live." He's like, "You're from Podunk, like me." And it turned out that we should have probably met each other probably, 30 times before we even worked together at Northbrook. And he took me, he's like, "Hey, you got a minute?" And he put me in his shift command car, and he took me on a tour of the village of Northbrook and told me how awesome of a place it was, and how this village has its, act together, and how well thought out, and how great of an organization it was. And so it just always, like, his personality, and I'm probably explaining him really, really horribly. I mean, I know Leonhardt, you mentioned him before. He knows Bob very well,
Yeah, you
and
said something already.
yeah, Brogan was the man. And probably my favorite thing in the world is when I show his picture up on the screen during my class. I've had so many people call me or come to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I know him," or "I worked with him," or I saw him." So it's good to know that people still know who this man is. Not that because he's been retired now for a little bit. And if someone from the class doesn't come up and tell me, I usually get a text from Bob. Be like, "You just did an orientation class," because I just got text messages from some so and so or whatever. But Bob, getting to know Bob is um, Bob and I had a lot in common, in terms of who we used to be. Bob, I don't want to speak ill of him or anything, but I would have to say that Bob had a little bit of a wild streak. And Bob was a little bit of a rebel back in the day. And we really connected on that. And but I also, like, you never would have known it when you met him. He's a squared away, very religious person. He has his priorities in line. It's faith, family, and fire were his three. I've stolen that from him, and but like, you listen to his stories of his youth, and he had a interesting youth uh, growing up and everything. And I drew a lot of parallels from that. And he was And what I didn't realize for a long time is that he was mentoring me without me even knowing I was being mentored. That like, I think he realized that in certain ways I was kind of possibly on a wrong path, um, maybe personally, uh, and where I was going. And he was very gentle, never judgmental, and always he's never given me bad advice. And once I started listening to him, things really started turning around for me, big time. And so he's always been, I mean, he was a battalion chief that, like, I remember it would be, he'd come down in the day room, get his bowl of ice cream, hang out for about 45 minutes, and then 9 o'clock, his wife Cindy would call, and then it was good night, boys. I'll see you later. And, yeah, so he was just that guy that was always there for me, and there for the guys. And yeah, so he's always been a huge influence. And if I could get the bracelet made, what would Bob Rogan do? I'd be wearing that every day because I think about how he would handle, especially personal issues. He was very much people before paper. I don't even know if he knew how to turn that computer on, but he knew how to take care of and talk to people. And that's what I try and aspire to as an officer, how I try and take care of the people that I get to work with. So,
Yeah, man, how wonderful early to be around that. Just to set, even like you said, you didn't even know you were being mentored, and you were being mentored. Like that's the best thing in the world. And maybe your eyes open up at some point. You're like, holy crap, he taught me so much stuff. And now you're eating at the buffet. Now you want more, and it's
yeah,
really cool. And
yeah, yeah. I've been lucky to have him still. I call him, my father passed away almost 10 years ago, and probably one of my proudest thing when I got promoted to lieutenant, he pinned my bugles on, which
oh,
would have been which would have been my dad when he got to do it. And yeah, Bob means a lot to me.
yeah. Well, cool. Well, we'll roll into some of these questions. First things first. So, what would you say the most important quality of a company officer? What would be the most important quality? I botched that, but you know what I'm asking.
Yeah, I I think that the one that I think just generally runs for me personally, and I think that I see what's most important for me, and it's number one on my list is humility. Is I think one of the most important things. I think without humility, there is no chance that I can take responsibility for my team's failures because if you're not humble, it's their fault. It's not my fault. And the difference between being a firefighter and a fire officer, it's when you're a firefighter, you're the guy that gets to do the thing, and it's up to you whether you're good or you're not good at it, and it's an individual thing. Whereas when you're a company officer, you're in charge of the people, or you're responsible for the people that do the thing now, and um, if they fail, that's a direct reflection on you. And it has nothing to do with whether they did it or not. It's because I didn't teach them, I didn't set them up for success. And if you're not humble, you point fingers out instead of in. And I think that's one of the big things. If you're not humble, you're not curious. Like if I'm humble, I already know what you think. I already know the answer. I'm not going to ask you your opinion. I'm going to assume what you're thinking, and I'm not going to take the time to ask the question. I'm just going to, yeah, I know that already. So I think that it closes your mind if you're not humble. You don't like, it doesn't allow you to keep a open mind if you're not humble. And I think that's absolutely important because all you are is as a company officer, you're just the formal leader. That's it. But like, I work with a team. I got 7 other firefighters on my crew with a relief officer, and they're all smarter than I am. I'm lucky enough that I get to, you know, that they call me Cap, and but uh, together they're always going to be, smarter than me and have a better idea. And if I'm not listening to that, I'm weakening the team. So I think that you know it takes out assumption. Like when you're, like if you can't be humble, you just always just assume that you know what's going on, and you're not curious anymore. So I think that's what I always think about. And I think humility goes into training, learning about the job, knowing that you're never going to be great at it, and that you can always, that failure is part of this process, and that you got to keep climbing the mountain every day. So I think that's important. Outside of that, I think for when I was growing or when I've been in the fire service, or for my boss, my biggest thing from an officer, what I look for is consistency. Is
Yeah.
for them to be the same person in the world. No one likes no one likes coming into work and being like, is it bad Pete today, or good Pete? Which one do we got today? And so I think that's another thing, that consistency is another thing that I think is an important trait in being an officer as well. So
Yeah, I mean, if you're not humble, you're not curious. I love that. What a great perspective to have for that. And yeah, I mean, obviously you love training, so that rolls right into that, and echoes everything. It's so important. It's so important.
yeah,
What? Sorry, go ahead.
no, I think that, like, yeah, you gotta, because yeah, when you go into training, I mean, you gotta be okay with failure, because training is, like, because if you don't think you have any weaknesses in your game, you're a liar. You're lying to yourself, and so you got to be, and and to sit there and act like I have all this, firefighting or officering figured out. I mean, that would be a horrible message to be a part of. I'd rather make sure the people around me know that I'm, like, that I have a expectation of a standard, that I'm going to be good, and if I'm not good, I'm going to fix it. And I'm willing to listen to that, whether if I'm not pulling my weight, I'm willing to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, awesome for sure. What would you say in like the last? I put 10. We can maybe adjust that, but what's changed the most in the last 10 years with company officers that maybe you've seen?
Um, at my job specifically is, like when I was saying that I took a test at my job with 11 years of experience on, and I got promoted with, so let me do the math, like 14-ish years on, and that was that was fast at my job. Fast forward to last year, we just promoted two lieutenants with 5 total years on our job. So I would say that's one big. The age difference is huge. Just the cycle that we're in the fire service, we are we're promoting earlier, and I think that puts a lot of pressure, and puts a compressed timeline on their growth and development. I mean, they got to do it faster, and they got to figure it out. And then, as a captain that supervises, like, I have a relief officer assigned to me with two other lieutenants, and my relief officer is one of those 5-year guys, and like, you got to let them make a mess a little bit. You got to, like, not set them up to fail, but you got to let them, um, you know, figure it out, and so I think the age and experience is a big thing. I think that that's caused the fire service in general to um, take a lot of power away from the company officers, and put it towards like, it's handcuffed a lot of company officers, or company officers don't really know the game that well, in order how to use the rule book to their advantage, and things like that. So then that decision making, a decision is going to be made on an issue at some level or another. Sometimes it's the guys beneath you that are going to do your job. You have a bad company officer, those firefighters are going to do that company officer's job. I mean, the job's going to get done. And sometimes, if the company officer's not doing his job, that company officer's boss is going to do it for him too. And a lot of times, that's what I feel like I've seen, both at a little bit at my department, and then, like, what I kind of feel like the pulse of the fire service is that, you see a lot of decision making being taken away from that company officer level, a little bit. And I think the age and experience, possibly because they lack that judgment, and maybe they're not set up in a situation where, they don't let them work with a net. And I think we need to make sure that, our company officers have nets, that they can phone a friend, and, and that's part of, like, what we believe in with our company officer program, is hey, you don't have a network. Guess what? You just made 30 new best friends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Call them. You know, you might not want to call your buddy from Lake Zurich that was in the class with you because he may or may not like you, or you might have a problem or something. But hey, you can go call this guy from another department that's adjacent to you that might have an interesting perspective or something.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's our biggest thing. It's been a big adjustment from the instruction side where like we'll have guys coming in there with 3 to 5 years of experience total in the fire
yeah,
service
yeah,
and wanting to take company officer. And I think that it makes sense to me. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to actually just figure out why. And I think a lot of the reasons is that like, number one, they're hiring young. Hey, I just got hired full time, and now basically I'm running a station, but I'm the full timer at this combination department, and I'm in charge of the station. I want the tools. And I think a lot of it is it's with our full-time tiered pension system and things like that. I mean, you're not going to have a guy. I have a firefighter on my crew. She's got to work till she's got to put like 32
yeah,
years in, 33 years in before she retires. I mean, like I don't know of too many firefighters, blue shirt firefighter paramedics that do this job for 33 years. So they're getting the training and education in early, and they're trying to jump on these positions early because otherwise they could get boxed out,
yeah.
and that's their career. So I mean, that's the biggest change, as I think right now that I've seen is the youth movement, and I think all the things that have gone with that youth movement.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. I mean, not even just in the full time realm, but like, you know, people are getting hired straight up instead of working for an East Dundee or an Antioch like
Hmm.
me or something like that, and they don't have even a little bit of that time to carry
Yeah.
over. And there's experience that comes with that would help. Even if you're only at whatever full time department for a handful of years. So there
Yeah.
is a lot of and like let's just be honest, we don't go to as many jobs as we used to, so they don't get
No.
to work those kinks out. And
No.
yeah,
Yeah. I think that's the like I'm not a I have a pretty strong stance on the generational debate, but the only thing that I've seen different about in the generations is right now the ease in which you can get a full-time job now is a big difference. And I think
yeah,
that changes the generation. Whereas, I work, I got my barn boss, my driver. I don't want to, he's over 50 years old. We'll just say that, but he's been a firefighter since he was 15 years old,
yeah,
doing volunteer, getting paid for nothing, back in the day. And, like that's one thing I think that we're missing is that like love of the job so much that they did it for free. Like you did it for a reason. You got fulfillment out of it, and it was before you got a paycheck for it. And now, like we got 21, 22-year-old people coming into a job, they're going to make the most money they've ever made in their life, and they've never had that experience of just loving, like wanting to do the
yeah.
job. And it's not a slight. It's the way it is, and I think it changes. We have to acknowledge that the perspective is just different. But yeah, I think it's gone into our company or our officer ranks as well, where we're, and a lot of places you talk to these guys, and when I talk to them during the class, they're just like, if it's not me, then who? And that's like that's one of my favorite lines. If not me, then who? And so I'll stand up and do it, and I totally get that. And so to me, that mentality of the volunteer firefighters is still alive in those young people. It's just they lack the time in position and the experience, and we have to make that up for them somehow.
Yeah.
We have to give them experiences through training or whatever to make up for what I was lucky enough to get before I went to Northbrook, and other guys have gotten before they went to their full-time places.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the net, and I feel like rather than a net, I think we're just putting people in harnesses, right? Like there's no you might fuck this up kind of thing. Like it, and because we're not supposed to fail at those things, but
Mhm.
there has to be. I mean, I love what you said about giving them a net, letting them have an opportunity, maybe to feel what it's like to fall a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Like, and yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's also hard, but you have to. I mean, like the one thing that like they don't tell you in the officer brochure when you get promoted is that you have to have hard conversations with people, and you can't be afraid to have hard conversations. And actually, Chief Rhodes talked about like that. And I really enjoyed what he had to say. Is like he identified, and I think any officers identified the same failure, that failure to say something when they need to say something. And I've kind of resolved that I never want to produce a 30-year problem at my department. So like, and if you have a 30-year problem at your department, it's because you either had, well, most likely it was because, at least my experience, was a weak company officer that didn't want to address it.
Yeah.
And so it's having tough conversations. And that's where I bring back the Bob Rogan. He's the first boss. He'd tell his guys literally, "I love you. I love you. It's man to man. I love you," and he meant it. And that's what I've stolen from him. Is that like this is coming from love, but it's going to be hard for you to hear. And like this is what we need you to do. And yeah, so it's a great theory that I have that like let your firefighter or let your future your fire officers have that net. But if the people that are above them, that the mentors aren't willing to mentor, it's really not gonna. Then it is just that they're just bungee jumping at that point.
Yes, totally different, right? A net means that there's at least something. If they do fall, they get caught by the net, theoretically or metaphorically, and then somebody talks to them about it, right? That's the big key, and that's one thing that's missing a lot. And I've noticed that too, obviously, with, I'm in a weird generation that's between where, we got hired and we were just at the tail end of that. Like, you had to fight to get a job. Like, it wasn't like it is now. And maybe there's more appreciation with that, but not necessarily. Like, there's guys a little bit older than me that act worse than I would say a 1 to 2 year firefighter. So it's all over. I'm not really sure what the actual catalyst is from it, but with the whole net thing, like you're and talking on that, those corrective like conversations, I feel like don't happen in the same way that maybe they used to, or maybe I came from a different generation of fire service where they were handled differently. But even at blue shirt to blue shirt, like you hear about it a week later, like, oh yeah, so and so is mad at you because you left your boots out 3 shifts ago. It's like, what? Like, why wouldn't you just come talk to me about it? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
And
the art of the conversation, I think, has kind of been lost a
No.
little bit. I think we need to get back to that, and not be afraid to talk about fire in the firehouse.
Oh my God,
and not just because they're hard conversations doesn't mean I have to be a jerk either. I mean, like, and my big thing is a company officer's expectations. I lay out my expectations. I used to actually have a form. You saw that in class. I had the list of. I stole that from Mark von Ampen. The 10 for you, 10 for me. But now I got the spiel down pretty good that I can do it without the script. And I'll talk to guys like at my department right now at my station. They send all the new guys to my station. So like my conversation with the other guys is like, hey, if you want to be here, this is the deal. Your ambulance time's going to be higher. I want you to be willing to mentor and train. If you don't, I'll find you another spot. I'll talk to the battalion chief and we'll get you to a different house type thing. But the expectation is if you're here, you're going to do it with a smile on your face, or at least pretend to smile, at least when you're around me, and put into these new guys, and it's amazing the reactions you get from that conversation. Like when you tell a guy like, hey, I am counting on you to help me. I need your help, to help train these new people and to give them a home here, and when you put that responsibility on your team, I've been very impressed from the responses I've gotten from that. So I think that those conversations we can't be afraid to have them, and you got to be expecting that it's going to go the other way on you too. I mean, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean,
honesty can go both ways.
Yeah, not every conversation is going to end with, high fives.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, those
Hmm.
They used to be, and maybe that is partially why at the company officer level some of that's lost, because at the blue shirt level it's lost. So it never, you know what I mean? It's not like you're going to magically get better at having those tough conversations. You
Yeah.
know, when all you did was to make fun of a guy, print a picture, and tape it to his locker, but never make fun of him
Hmm.
to his face. Like,
Yeah.
that's very different than
Hmm.
what another generation of fire service was.
Yeah.
So it's very
Very, very
interesting.
true.
Um, so we talked about Ted, and one thing about Ted again, from Cicero that was interesting to me and brought up kind of a conversation that I had brought back into the fire station was he was already promoted, and they sent
Hmm.
him to COFO, and I thought that was interesting, and I was curious on your thoughts on maybe what pros and cons would be behind that and the difference between those two things.
Um, I have a completely biased opinion of that, and my biased opinion is that if you're, I think that what I feel from the feedback of guys like Ted, and I've had other officers in my class, and not that I asked them for special feedback, but I mean, tell me if we're on the mark with this class or not. And I think when you're doing what we're doing at NIPSA, I think that um, if your department would allow it, I think they should allow you to wait to get the certification, get promoted and then go take the class. Because I think that the class plus the task book now, I think will give guys a very good leg up on the job when they actually have to go do the job. But back to the old Fire Officer One program, my whole thing is rip that Band-Aid, get it over with as soon as possible, and then go find some mentors that'll teach you how to do the job of company officer. So, but I think that guys like Ted are very just they speak to what the fire service is. I mean, like this guy, technically in my mind, didn't have to be in the class,
Yeah,
and he came in there and he bought into what we were selling, and he helped lead that class. Like, hey, this guy's a officer, and he's buying what these schmucks up front are saying. So it was really easy to get our points across when he had our back, and I think that. I think it goes with one of the things we're going to talk about is like that continued learning, that no matter how you get the job or how you get the certification, I think when it comes down to it, we still, even at NIPSTAR, are providing a certification
yeah,
at the end of the day. And that's not it. It can't end at just a certification, because there's certified and there's qualified. And OSFM is going to tell me I'm a certified fire officer. My firefighters and my administration are going to tell me whether I'm qualified
yeah.
to be that boss. And so, like, um, and we try and work on more of the intangible stuff a little bit more. We try and work within those rules that we can with OSFM. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a certification class. I think that there's better classes out there than ours. You spoke about LDDM. I'm getting to take that class in the fall. I think that Fireground Company Officer is a great class to take. Probably it's tied for my number one class. I think that there's multiple other ways that you can learn the job. So uh, I think that a lot of those things, it really comes down to whatever the department can handle.
Yeah.
My department wants you to have instructor one and phase two done prior to taking the test. I don't know if I did 40 or 80 hours of phase two anywhere else, if that's really going to make me a better company officer than actually doing the job. So
Yeah.
I think that you got to look at it's a certification, not a qualification, and judge accordingly, and make that decision for yourself, obviously personally, and then you got to go with the rules of your department too as well. So that's my non-answer to that, I guess.
No, I think we're kind of on the same page with that. Where, like, if really the end goal is to create a well-rounded company officer, that there's more to it than just that one class, and
Absolutely.
it almost does seem like, by context, them waiting until after they're promoted almost makes the certification class make more sense. Like, you could send
Hmm.
them to Fireground Company Officer, or you can send them to LVDM, or whatever opportunities where they're doing those roles
Hmm.
and thinking in leadership. and then you teach them, okay, hey, this is what happens when a guy gets hurt. This is how you have tough conversations. This is how you have, because they're doing the job already. Like,
Yeah.
I really did, hearing that that's what he did, like, actually made me think, like, maybe that is a better way to do things.
It could be. And I
But
mean, now with the COFO certification, phase 3, you bring that book knowledge that you get in phase 1, and you bring that practical knowledge that we provide you in phase 2, and you take it back to your department and apply it to your department's rules, regs, and what they want. The bad part is what I have seen, and just as a generalization and not an accusation, is that a lot of departments are just, for lack of better, just checking the box with whatever OSFM's task book is. We're just going to do it that way, and it may or may not have any relevance to that department and how they do business. And to me, that's a missed opportunity. The opportunity with the phase 3 task book is, like a training officer such as yourself can actually mold that to give it to actually do in-house training. And then that kind of negates their whole conversation, is that, like, you are technically certifying them in-house then to do that job, which then you can decide what the timing of that is going to be. And it took me a long time to see the genius of the COFO program, believe it or not. Like I said, kicking and screaming and being pushed off ledges to do it. And now, if applied properly, I think it can be a great tool for departments.
yeah,
So,
yeah, like we were talking before we went live, some of those things, the rules, the ISO, the OSFM task books, the research books, the JPRs, like, that's just minimum if you really think about it, right? And
yeah,
like, those are just the rules you got to live with, but you could do way more than that, right?
absolutely.
And, yeah, those are huge missed opportunities when they're not done right.
Yeah,
and if it's just,
I remember the state looking at one when I was in the training division. They wanted to look at someone's credential, and all they were looking to see is, I'm just making this number up, they wanted to make sure that 41 pieces of flare were complete.
Yeah.
They have no idea what I made them do.
Yeah.
And it could have been really bad. It could have been write their name 41 times, or it could have been what, the program that we kind of tried to build at Northbrook. And so, like, because they're deferring to the department to say, are you going to vouch for this person? Are they worthy of them being a company officer? And that's how you got to view it as a training officer, is that you're the gatekeeper now, not OSFM, and a little bit.
They're not going to audit every single thing that you wrote. Like, there's no way they would have time to do that. And so really it comes down to what product you put out in that world, right? In the training officer world. But
yeah, 100% agree with that.
What could a junior firefighter do? And we've kind of already talked about some of these things a little bit, but outside of maybe some of those other classes, what could a junior firefighter do now in preparation for company officer later in their career?
Yeah, the big thing with anytime you're looking ahead for something, I think that you have to start with the end in mind. When I said I wanted to be a company officer, who did I want to be? And who was a good one? Who was a bad one? And you want to emulate that. So what do I need to do? Like, was it like, oh, this guy knew fire behavior really well, or this guy was really good with tools, or this guy was really good with people? And start working on those skills now. Like, if you can't talk to anyone and you can't communicate, that's a problem. I think that you have to figure out what your weaknesses are and attack them. But like, it's pretty easy. If you wanna one day be, whatever. I had a guy say, like, one day I would like to do your job. I'd like to be a Station 12 captain. I want to be the captain of the tower truck. I'm like, okay, cool. And I go, well, think of what, that's your end goal. Now, what do you have to do what are all the steps going backwards to make it there? So it's like, it could be something simple. Like, my favorite thing to pick on is uniforms. And I come off as a uniform guy, and I'm not a uniform guy, but it's always easy to pick on uniforms, right? And it's pretty easy. Like, if one day you want to be a company officer, guess what you're going to have a conversation about? You're going to have a conversation about uniforms. So like, should you be the firefighter that is actually, like, not zipping up his boots and blousing his pants or something, or whatever the great travesty of uniform in the fire service is today? I think ours is not collared shirts. You said that before,
Yeah.
and it's like, dude, if you were always the guy that didn't have never had the right shirt on, and now you're the guy that has to, like, maybe you need to, like, think about, like, what that job is, and, like, because, I'm sure there's been people who are like, man, that must have been a big pain in the butt for that lieutenant to tell me every day on duty that I wasn't doing this, or whatever. So, like, start with that end in mind, and come up with actionable things that you can actually improve your game, because you're a junior firefighter. So find a mentor, find someone to mimic and copy in the fire service. Find someone that's going to talk to you about the job. I don't think there's too many of us that aren't afraid to share our experiences, like through podcasts and things
Yeah.
like that here, books. So yeah, find a mentor, find out someone you want to emulate, and just and follow their lead. You know, I'll tell you all the things I did wrong. So I tell people all the things I did wrong. There's, what, so that they don't make those mistakes. I think Jimmy Theobald said, like, I made, I can't repeat all the mistakes that the people did before me. We have to learn something from them, and I think that's so true. Like, that's why we try and offer up examples. So that's the whole thing, is that you got to have that awareness. If that's something that you want to do, look ahead, look around you, see what's right, see what's wrong, see what the department demands of you, see what the job demands of you. The job of a company officer in Lake Zurich is completely different than a company officer, possibly might be different in the demands in Northbrook.
Huh.
And like, you just got to understand those nuances, and come up with your own plan, because you can't stop being yourself either at the same time. So it's got to work for you.
Yeah, right. There's a blend between, like, you're not going to pretend to be someone you're not, but you don't want that big switch to get flipped when you get made. All of a sudden, you're a different person, right? Like,
Absolutely.
totally get what you're saying, and I love
Yeah.
the Stephen Covey. I'm always about the begin with the end in mind. I love that.
Oh,
So
cool. I didn't even know who I was plagiarizing. So,
yeah, dude. What is it? The 7 Habits or Highly Successful People? I should actually know that, but
it's on the reading list. I can tell you that.
it's
But
an awesome book. It really is.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I could say that the feedback I give during classes, one thing I can tell is that, with the youth movement that we're having, is that I think the working knowledge of rules, regulations, and things like that, and sometimes basic tactics, is very, very low. And it's like, hey, if you are going to be the person that makes this decision, you need to be making it with as much information as possible. Like, the biggest decision you'll make as a company officer is whether you're going to commit firefighters inside a building or not. And you better know when it's a yay and when it's a nay, like, and it's a 50-50, right? Ray McCormick will say it's 50-50. We're either going to do it or we're not. But,
Right.
like, for the company officer, you best be right. You better have that backed up by something other than, I flipped a coin and we're going to go interior, and so, like, that knowledge aspect, there's a huge thing. Just because you have the bugles on your collar doesn't mean you have the knowledge. And, like, that's one of the things that, like, it's like, hey, and that comes back to that humility thing, is that, like, you got to realize that you don't have all the answers, and you got to be willing to, like, be a sponge and soak it all up.
Yeah. What would you say? This is not on our list, but what would you say you see that you would like to improve in the future of company officer training? Right, with all these things that we've been considering, and the changes of the fire service and generational and all that other stuff, what would you say would be something that you would like to see change or adjust for company officer training?
I think that, the first thing that comes to mind is, there's nothing that says that, like, to be a company officer, you've ever had to lead someone before, or actually be in charge of a group. Like, you go look through that, you go look through a lot of, the classes and everything like that. Like, there's nothing, there's no practical evolution until you get to your passbook, for instance. There should be some sort of, that should be a mandatory part of the training. Much like a firefighter is expected to be able to pull hose, get a hydrant, throw a ladder, force a door, we expect them to execute those skills. At what point, hey, Alex, you're in charge of me. at what point have we trained you or taught you how to give me direction? Set an expectation. We might not, it's so late in the game that we're really considering those things. I think that has to be part of the curriculum is practical application. I think is a must, and it's something that we're lacking.
What would you say would be a way to start working that in, other than, I mean, you guys work in live fire and those opportunities. What are some other avenues? And we're just spitballing here, but ways to get people to do that.
I think the way is stealing from, like I said, steal from everyone as much as you can. Is that Fireground Company Officer School? One of the things is like when I was in class, I was in a company of three. None of us were lieutenant, or I was a lieutenant, and the other two, actually, two of us were lieutenants. Now that I think about it, apologize. And but every day, someone would be the company officer, and we'd get reps. Hey, we're going to do a drill today. We'd have to do our rig check. One guy would be responsible. And so, like, they were teaching that person how to be a company officer. Now, for me, at that point, I had already been a company officer. But, like, if you took that, class of non-firefighters that are looking to do that job, put them in charge of something. That should be part of the prerequisites knowledge. Make them do a drill. Make them give direction. Make them, like, do something that can push them to make decisions, both on the fire ground and in the firehouse. I think it's very easily replicated. I think the timeline of when you do that is more of the interesting question. Is, like, I'm familiar with a phase two. Like during the training, they read their book, and then they come back to class for phase two, and that's when we do it. I think that even if you were you had no hands-on ability wherever you're taking that COFO, I think that you could incorporate those types of elements into the classroom very easily, just to give them something, to give them a taste, and then encourage them to look for these other opportunities to go out and enjoy those other experiences like Fireground Company Officer and LD.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Like some people haven't even led cooking lunch at the firehouse. You know what I mean? And even something as simple as that, like practices communication and leadership. Leadership's probably a stretch for something that simple, but I don't know. In a way, like you're still in charge of getting some tasks complete, and put them in charge of stuff. What a great, just plain and simple, just like that. Put them in charge of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, like I run an apparatus committee at work, and we have subcommittees that and it's kind of fun. Like, hey, you can run the ambulance subcommittee. You're running the ambulance build, and it's funny when I get the report back. Like that they're struggling with it, and it's like, yep, that's leading people. That's trying to direct people and give direction. And it's like, so then you go through the whole thing. Well, was your direction clear? And then you do the QA, and you find out that the question, he didn't want to be forceful in his email, so he left things open-ended or something like that. And you're like, yeah, you got to take away any ambiguity on this. You have to actually be like, hey, I need this, and this for you at this time, and let me know if you're in or out by this day. And those are types of things about being direct and being able to give direction and providing those opportunities for them is I think really, really important. So I mean, it could be anything, like a volunteer project. There's nothing harder in the world than to supervise a volunteer project. Like, you're not getting paid for anything. If I can motivate you and encourage you or get work out of you and not have to pay you or compensate you, that's magic. So like there's other ways even outside the fire service, organizations that you can get involved in, like those volunteer groups where you could practice like organizing and showing initiative and giving direction and things like that. So even if you're not having a spot at your fire service or something, like there's plenty of opportunity out there. You just got to stop and look around for it.
Yeah. You were kind of almost dipping into, so Chief Lighting's in the chat, and he brought up technical writing. So communication through technical writing, and he's spot on with that. Man, have I read some emails that firemen have put out that are just like, oh my God, please don't put that you work for our fire department at the bottom of that. What, use ChatGPT or something, or GPT, man. Like, you're killing me. But he's right. Like, getting information out is through email. Welcome to fire service. That's it now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I will say that COFO has some aspects of that, which
Yeah.
I think is built into the curriculum to a certain extent. But then I want to say, if I remember correct, we had to write memos and things like that. Like that was part of it. So
Yeah.
he is right. That's a great step, but maybe there's more that comes with that too.
Yeah, and that's actually for a reason. It's literally I've been sent emails, personnel review emails with emojis and text shorthand on
Yes,
them.
that's right. I remember you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like when we're making a personnel decision, you're going in front of a chief or a board or something like that, and like that's not acceptable. And that preps you for even your task book. It says in your task book that like all your submissions need to be professional. I mean, there is, I did not think that there was going to be any math on this test. Well, there is reading and writing. You have to be able to communicate. The communication skills are so important. If I had known, I never knew I was going to do so much talking as a company officer in terms of having conversations. Every day is a counseling session. Like I'm having chats with people all the time, and then like you're writing stuff all the time. So like that technical writing skill is huge. So there's plenty of places and areas that you can practice and get better. And my advantage and advantage that you're going to have is all the curriculum that you write in the training division. I was putting, quick drills out and lesson plans out and writing memos and training briefs and things like that. And so like, and obviously some of my early stuff, it's just like anything else. It was like written in crayon and way outside the lines, and you see it slowly.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the better you get at it. And so there's, all of it is important. I mean, like, not one thing is the most important thing. I know that, like I said, like, best officer I ever worked for, in terms of Bob Rogan, he probably, the computer was his enemy, but at the same time, he wasn't I'm not going to learn how to use that thing.
Yeah.
He still could do it. He just worked within the technology to the best of his ability. And I think we sometimes get to that point where, no, this is the way I'm doing it, or I don't need to know that. That doesn't make a good fire officer, or that does make a good fire officer. We become very, very grounded and dug in on our position, where we do have to, if I can't communicate to my bosses, there have been instances where, there's some serious personnel decisions that may or may not have gotten made, or in my position now, a vehicle may or may not get bought,
Yeah.
and like things like that. Like you gotta be able to, all those things are important. So.
Yeah, and I mean that's a skill that really is never taught, like at all. And quite frankly, I almost feel like almost any company officer should be able to theoretically, not that they all should, but theoretically write like an article about a call they were on to, like, say a trade magazine, right, explaining
Absolutely.
what happened, because Leidig, mentioned here again, about communication outside the walls and to civilians. Like, you should be able to articulate anything to someone that knows nothing about our job, because ultimately those are the people that support us.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from company officer levels. So,
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Outside our walls is even scarier because if you want to feel stupid real quick, try and explain why it is what we do, and if you're not prepared to do that to someone that has no reference,
yeah.
You could submarine yourself pretty quick. It's been fascinating to have an opportunity to have like a little look behind the curtain in some of those rooms and see what that goes down. And it's definitely I'd call that a major league skill. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, well, dude, there's times I feel where you talk like what are those, knuckle dragger around the boys, and it's real easy to talk about stuff. But then you go to a block party and you're trying to explain things, and you're like, how do I say this without using all of my jargon that I'm so used to using? And not that they want to hear you sound like a robot, but to a certain extent, like they have no clue what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think one thing personally that I've seen that's lacking in the fire service, at least in our area maybe, is yes, OSFM has the race certification JPRs, but essentially it's just a task book all over again.
Mhm.
in a 3-year time period. And I would argue that that's not enough and that's not specific enough. But what are some things that a company officer can do uh, to catch up with training? You know, oftentimes the company officer is training their people, focusing on that stuff, focusing on the paperwork, focusing on everything else, and they don't have a lot of time to focus on themselves to continue to develop their skills. And I feel like that's kind of a lonely thing for them to try to do. So, what are some things that a company officer can do to keep freshening their game up?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I believe that leaders are readers, so you got to read. And there's so much out there to read. I've I've really jumped back into, like, I mean, fire engineering. I get it. It's a little bit. You got to take kind of sometimes take a loan out to get their books and everything because everything's like at least $50. But
Oh, I know.
I mean, they published the book of Andy. I mean, like that's a the guy was a psychic. He's writing about things in the late '90s that I'm watching FSRI videos on now in 2025, and that are all like, you know, it's amazing what he was writing about 30 years ago that is still holds true. The 30 fires that you must know.
Yeah.
I'm using that one every day at the kitchen table
Yeah.
during meeting because, like, it was a little shocking when I sat down with my crew and I said, "Who knows what Black Sunday is?"
Yeah.
And, like, it was crickets, and it's like, well, the book is called 30 Fires You Should Know. So yeah, you got to read, and you don't have to read like 100 pages, just 5 pages or something, and wiggle out some time. So I think reading fire service manuals, blogs, whatever, just to see what's going on outside your walls is important. The other thing that I could say that I missed the boat on, and I've caught the boat now, is the IFSRI training, the UL studies, the stuff that they have out there. I'm knocking out module after module. I sit down every night at work, and I at least try and do like a half hour of a little bit. And it started an account. It's free, and they're talking. I mean, they're teaching you different ways that you can be as aggressive as you're allowed to be at your department, I guess, or
Yeah.
and they're not telling you what the answer is, but they're just giving so much information, and it's like I'm just drinking from that fire hose, and shame on me that I hadn't. There's stuff on there that I didn't know, and so I think that should be almost mandatory for a company officer. So
I'm
I'm
with
trying to
you.
get through that. Um, it and like I said, they're not telling us how to do it. They're just giving us, like, if you do it this way, know this. If you do it this way, know this. And I
Yeah.
think it's great information. Like they were talking about, they were doing the Northbrook burns at UL back in 16, I believe, and they were talking about things that just I've heard about just now because I couldn't be bothered to read the study, like um, room searches, closing the door behind you and isolating. I mean, like, we were doing it from the outside of the building, and all of a sudden they talked about back in 17, we should maybe consider doing this from inside the building. You're on the interior hallway, close the door behind you. I've mentioned that to some old hats, and you should see the looks on their
Oh, yeah.
faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, if and then like, I was lucky enough back in, I think, September to have to do the Division 3 brought out Inside Fire Training with Andy Starnes,
Yeah.
and he broke it down into two simple things that in today's fire environment you have two choices. You got to either cool it down or you got to isolate yourself from it. And it's just like, yeah, cool. Me, dumb fireman, I can think of two things I need to be able to do. And so, like, as my primary responsibility is a truck, there's times that we may or may not have extinguishment with us. So we have to know that we either need to be able to extinguish it with our pump can, or we got to isolate ourselves from it. So I mean, it gives us good practical, tactical, applicable knowledge to, and actionable stuff. Because we're all criminally undermanned. I've yet to meet a firefighter that says we have way too many people on my engine company.
Yeah. Right.
And I mean, like, you gotta, as a company officer, even for me, I have to have a plan that if it's just me and my engineer showing up because my tailboard's at the hospital and I don't have an ambulance, what can I do? What's going to be the best decision for anyone that could be in that building? And so like all those things, the UL studies are just amazing gold mine of information. So yeah, get into that. You need to that should be mandatory knowledge. And then it should be something. I don't know how practical or how available it'll be for everyone, but you got to get down to IFSI and do their Fireground Company Officer class. It's that is by far, like I said, that's tied to my first favorite class that I've ever taken. A lot of team built, like it was just the most practical. You're in a team of three, just like we are on the fire service, and you're running fires. You're doing the workload of three firefighters. So like, yeah, that 180-pound victim that you just brought out, like it's the three of you. How quickly are you getting back into that building? You may or may not be.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very realistic.
I think that one's still grant funded too. I don't think that one lost it. I know a bunch
No,
of
no.
theirs did.
Good.
I want to say that one still made it because RIT still
Good.
did, which I was
Yeah,
surprised RIT did. But
Phenomenal class.
Yeah.
They do a fantastic job. I would loved it. My body didn't love it as much, but I loved it. And then I think that the other way for a company officer to continue their knowledge is there is no shortage, or there's an extreme shortage of firefighters and company officers. We need instructors. Like fire academies, we need help. So like, you want to teach? I got a spot for you at NIPSTA. You just give me a call and we'll work something out, because if you teach it, you got to know it. And so that's training. Like I said, I get more out of teaching a class than the students get from us. I steal more than I get. And so it makes up. And all I can promise you about being a fire service instructor is that the days are long and the pay is short. But the job fulfillment is great when you see what you're going to be able to bring back to your firehouse is like it's priceless. So like, even if you don't have the ability to go take these classes, you don't have a computer or whatever, go teach at your department. Like, you don't have to go to an academy, and you don't have to be like a department authorized instructor. Go out in the bay, grab someone and teach them something. I mean, like, at some point someone's got to listen to you, right? And so go work on stuff. But those are all going to be things that are going to increase your skill set and increase your value to the people that you work for.
yeah, I mean, that's probably the soundbite right there, because I mean, it's the truth. You get out and you teach people, you learn real quick what you know and don't know and how to communicate with people, and I think that boosts your confidence for sure. And yeah, and I do think that there's a shortage, right? Like,
Yeah.
For sure, of people that want to do that on top of their regular every third day kind of thing. So
Yeah, I mean, it's hard now. I mean, like, it's the same stuff that we see in our firehouses as everyone's torn in a million different directions, and family, comes first and everything like that. I'm fortunate enough that my family allows me to do what I do. I don't have too many hobbies other than this, and this is what I get to do, and they allow me to be pretty psychotic about it, about how often I'm able to do it, and I owe it all to them, and I get that. But like, if we're talking about, you want to be an officer, you gotta realize what the importance of that role is, and you got to be able to teach, you got to be able to communicate, you got to be good at the job. You have to be able to perform, and it's not just like, the gods from above blessed me with these bugles and I'm good to go. I gotta earn that spot every day, and there's days that I earn it, and there's days that I stall, and I have some pretty interesting self-reflection, and I just know that I failed that day, and I got to get better. And I think teaching is a great way to give back. Like, if you're going to get more out of the people and the relationships you make than the dollar signs in your bank account. But at the end of the day, it's going to make you better.
Well, yeah, and it's almost like you're going to a class for free
Hmm.
to a certain
Yeah.
extent, right? Like you get so much out of it, even on the other end, and it's always awesome to be part
Hmm.
of those things. For sure, and
Yeah.
not that it's not valuable in your own department, but outside of that, like with a cadre or not even like a formal cadre, just jumping in with things. I think there's a lot to that. You get to be
Yeah.
with some awesome people.
I always say that the waiting line for the people willing to do things at your department is an express lane. There's not too many people in it. And like if you want to step up and do something, you can go find something to do. And like starting a training committee or starting, like I guarantee you if someone gave my training officer a lesson plan and said, "Hey, I think I really like to do this drill," my training officer would be like, "Thanks for taking care of that for me."
Yeah,
Like I appreciate that, like takes one thing off their plate, and so like there's no shortage of ways that you can get involved and do that. So even if you don't have any of these other resources at your fingertips.
yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I'll give a quick shout out to who's watching if they have a question they want to ask Pete. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of roll into the closing questions. Like I always say, the closing questions aren't like this quick, rapid thing. We're going to go through them, so we're not done yet. So don't go running away
Okay.
or anything. But um, in the fire service, what is something? Sorry. Oh my God, this is a new question for me. And apparently, I'm one of those illiterate people that writes with crayon when I type these up. So, other than the fire service, what is something that you are nerdy or passionate about? I know you said you don't have a lot of hobbies outside, but everybody's got one thing.
Yeah. So like outside of the fire stuff, I mean, my family is a big deal. I got a 7-year-old, so that I got one, and I might as well have a team over here. But she keeps us pretty busy. So between my wife and my daughter, that usually is a lot of my free time. The big nerdy thing I would have to probably say music would be the next one. So there's not a lot of we don't get to go to live shows as much as we used to because of said 7-year-old, but live music and going to shows and stuff is always like a big thing. So I'm pretty OCD about my music and how much music I have, and I'm always trying to find something different and new to listen to. But so yeah, that's what I'm
Very
doing, and
cool.
then reading in history then too
Uh,
for private time.
you play any instruments?
I've hacked on a guitar a couple times, and I pick it up and I once every I think 9 to 10 months, and for about a week, and then I put it down. So it was one of my goals again to get doing that.
Huh,
I started as a drummer, so but I haven't done that in a while either. But yeah, I do want to pick up the guitar again.
very cool.
It's one of the goals for 2025. We'll see
Yeah.
how that goes.
The origin of the question actually comes very similar. When I had Chief Rhodes on, we talked afterwards, and going to Indianapolis and all that for FDIC. He was giving me all these spots that I could go see music, and he's a big music
Oh yeah,
buff. And I was like, oh my God, I should ask questions like this to people because
yeah,
I don't know, like every firefighter's got something that they're nerdy about that's not the fire
oh yeah,
service. Like, and I mean nerdy. Like, one of the guys I work with, one of the hardest nosed dudes I've ever met, loves tow trucks, and he's obsessed with tow trucks to the point where he
yeah.
could tell you everything about tow trucks. And it might not be traditional nerdy like comics, but he's
No,
definitely a nerd about about that
hey,
stuff. So
I think probably one of the best things that happened is it's not a bad thing to be a nerd about stuff. Like
no,
it's like, hey, that's your niche. It could be anything from music to like oh, you like Civil War history or whatever.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, don't judge. Don't,
absolutely,
you're into what you're
absolutely.
into.
Uh, we half touched into this, but still, we'll talk again. What's the best training or class that you've ever participated in?
Okay, yeah, those are easy for me. So my tie for one is Rid Under Fire and Fireground Company Officer. I don't know how. I think I believe, and I don't want to totally make it sound like I'm ancient, but I think I went to either the second or third ever class of Rid Under Fire. So it was either '06 or '08. I forget when that program came out. and I think they had only done it one or two times before that. So of course, I always just say, "Oh, it was tougher in my day," but no, I've heard they've made it much tougher now. There's a lot more. There's probably a lot more in tune to safety now than they were.
I mean,
But
yes and no. It's still it's still live fire with live people. So
yep. But I also did that when I was, I think, 26 years old. I did fireground company officer when I was 37 years old or something like that. And I think that I'd like to consider myself in pretty decent shape, even with the age and everything. And I think fireground company officer kicked my butt harder than Red Under Fire.
really, wow.
Yeah, just because the work teams and the realistic work amount of work that they gave us. But like I said, it could have been an age thing. I'm not sure.
No,
But
maybe
those
you
two
got a
classes,
point. Yeah.
those two classes are my top two, and then the third one is the Fireground Command School. I was lucky enough. My department, when you get promoted to captain, I'm a part-time assistant shift commander. So when the battalion chief's off, I get to drive the fire SUV around on those days. So they put you in command school, and I think that wasn't physically challenging. It was definitely a gentleman's course, and I hope that if anyone ever heard me say that, it's not a disparagement of that course. It's all sets and reps of organizing the call, like, and what you would expect from your incident commander to be able to, like, accountability and control. That's what the incident commander does, and it's 5 days of sets and reps on that, and so it's very much a practical mind scrabble on that. So I remember first day of class, they said there's no way that you shouldn't be able to balance. I think it was either 5 or 7 companies in your head without having to write anything down. And I'm like, how do you do that? And then you go do their program, and you're using rig numbers that aren't your rig numbers. Like, my stations are 10, 11, and 12. I know who my mutual aid companies are, whether it's the 30s, the 20s, the 19s, any of the Glenview companies. I know their rig numbers. Well, there you're like, well, you're getting squad 7, engine 2, truck 4, and like those numbers mean nothing to me. And by the end of the week, you're just managing it. And so it was just a different type of hard. But yeah, like, I think the way they do that class and the way they teach you how the importance of being a strong, controlling incident commander, and not by controlling in terms of like telling everyone what to do. It's just, I guess maybe managing is a better word. So I thought that was a great class as well. So those three classes, all IFSI classes.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the command school actually marries up with the officer school. So you have 10 companies of 3. So those are your fireground officers, and then you usually have 10 battalion chiefs. And so and one for each company, and that's how they divide it out. And so yeah, it's a good class. And to be able to, like, the cool part is you go to fireground company officer school, you get to go to the head of the line for chief officer school. Then so you're more likely to get in that second class.
Very cool.
If you take that progression.
You ever think about doing RIT Chief now that that's up and running?
That's on the list. So
yeah.
I burned my 1 week of class for 2025 doing the LDDM based on actually a lot of your conversations. I think it was Mike Doble when you were talking about with him. Yeah. So that kind of got me into, I'm going to check that one out. And maybe 2026 I'm going to go look to do the RIT Chief. But I was looking at like what is right now as a company officer is more practical and applicable. I'm like, well, the way they talked about that class, I'm going to take that one. So
yeah, you can't go wrong with it.
RIT Chief is on the list for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll get a kick out of the final of LDDM. I think the one thing, and I won't spoil it, is it puts everyone on an even keel for leadership. And unlike anything I think I'd experienced, it's totally neutral and everyone's equal in the decision making. And it's really weird how they do it, but it's fun. So if they're still doing that, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't change it. So
I'm looking forward to it. So,
yeah,
I think it'll be fun.
And what level are you going at?
My boss tried to sneak me into the chief officer one, and I said I want to do company officer one.
Yeah.
So my buddy's going to be in the chief officer one. I'll be in the company officer one.
Okay.
So, so I'll actually get to hear how that one goes too a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I would be able to go again. So So at least I'll get a perspective of what they're talking about in that class if I don't ever get to go.
From what it sounded like too, that the lieutenant level you still get so like at the fireman level we got exposed to a lot of lieutenant level stuff, and the
Okay.
same thing was kind of in play between lieutenant and chief level. So
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
think you'll get stuff at a higher level, but the
Yeah.
lieutenant one, they put you to work. It's cool to see. They
Yeah.
yeah
I'm really looking forward to it. It's if you're teaching, you gotta be taken.
yeah
So I gotta take a class. Gotta fill my cup.
yeah for sure. Yeah, it's a unique class. It's cool. I really hope they figure out the grant funding again because now it's like
Yeah.
2,500 bucks or something. But
Yeah. My training officer wasn't too enthused about that.
yeah, hopefully they get it figured out because there's places countryside. It's in their promotional requirement,
Jeez.
but it was free for so long, so it didn't matter. And so hopefully
Yeah.
that doesn't change. But
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. I think it'll work itself out. It just might not be on the timeline that we as firemen find acceptable, but I bet
no.
they've always gotten it worked out. So I'm hoping that that's just the case again.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they figure that out.
Mhm.
What's one mistake that you've made and learned from?
Um, because my answer would have been different after I hadn't listened to Chief Rhodes. I liked his, kind of being afraid to say something when you need to say something as an officer. I learned that one pretty quick, and uh, it's something that like it's that what do you call it? The courage to lead, I guess, type thing. So I'd go with I think that early on in my career, and this is kind of going back to the influence that Bob Brogan had, is that on my career is that um, not I took for granted the fact that like the things that appealed to me about the fire service was like that honor, that trustworthiness, that like we are the good guys, we're going to do the right thing, and all that stuff. And I used to think that like you could have a work persona, and what you did at work was it didn't necessarily need to be the same thing as what you were in your personal life. So I would have to say that like your personal life. I used to think that my personal life and my work life are completely two different. That's work Pete, and that's play Pete, or whatever you want to call them. And I realized real quick. He helped me realize that like who you are outside the building is going. You're going to bring that into the building. And so like if you're not living your life in a honorable way outside the building, that's going to follow you inside the building. And like it's kind of like things that I would never find acceptable in a firehouse. I did outside the firehouse, and he helped me realize that that's not a smart play for
Yeah,
longevity. And going back to that, starting with the end in mind, it's like, hey, where do you want to be? Just kind of think about those things. And I think that's where, he kind of had some experience on his own end that he was able to kind of give me some advice or some perspective on. And I think that, it's the same thing now. It's like, everyone on my street, whether they've ever noticed I mean, I always say everyone on your street knows who the firefighters are. And I've asked a lot of times in class, has anyone gotten the knock on the door late at night, or the doorbell ring, or because they know that you're going to solve the problem. And so like people recognize you off duty for what you do to your day to day, and you have to live your life, in accordance with those same. You're never off duty. You have to live your life the
yeah,
same way that you do it on duty. Uh, that was one of the things that I just, I was a early 20-some-year-old kid that, of course, I was the smartest person in the room, and what I was doing was cool. And I was really glad that I saw that that was not the way to do it. So that was a mistake that I luckily corrected early on. But it's one of those where I found myself actually where the shoe is then on the other foot, that like, I've been able to kind of poke or prod, others that might be heading down that same path that I was. So
yeah. I think there was this lie that was told to the firemen. I don't know, probably 15 or so years ago, that work-life balance meant completely shutting off being a fireman, and that's not the case. That's not what it is. Like we're supposed to be a certain type of person, altruistic, and honorable and all those things. And like, you don't just shut that off when you go home. Like, you don't. It's okay to always be a fireman. Like it, but and that doesn't mean you shouldn't shut off your stresses and try to figure those things out when you go home. Like that's not what I'm saying. But I remember being told that earlier in my, not by everybody, but early in the career, like, hey, nerd, like when you're not here, you're not a fireman. It's like, but I have a pager. Like I actually kind of am, but that's like, and yeah, I think that I'm sorry that I'm kind of ranting a little bit, but I think that stole a lot of that, like, who we are-ness. I don't know how else to phrase it, but, like, people just neglect that or they reject it, and they're only trying to be it every third day when they're, at the fire station. But it's like, well, you can't just pretend you're not and then come in here and be it. Like, you kind of have to be it all the time. And it's not even a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be a fireman all the time.
I think we're here to help people. So
yeah, what did it for me?
It's a good way to live your life all the time.
I'll be totally open. What did it for me was my son was probably my first son was probably only like 6 months old, like really not very old. I took him shopping, and I'm getting him in the car, and a woman comes up, and she's asking if I have jumper cables. Okay, and I'll say this because I was not a dick to her, but I feel horrible about it. It made me reflect. I was so focused on, my son and everything, and he's in the car seat and he's fine. And I told her no, and then we drove off, went off with our day. And I get home and I'm like, what kind of example did I just set? He had no idea. He's like 6 months old.
Yeah.
It's like she came to me because I've got a sticker in the back of my truck that says IFF on it. And I just totally denied this woman when I could have helped her. And from that day on, and this was, only 4 years ago, right? And, I thought that I knew everything about how I was as a fireman and all that. And I totally missed an opportunity there. And I realized, like, no, you can't just pretend to not be one when you are one all the time. And that was such a missed opportunity for me to just help somebody. And that's what we're supposed to be about. So there's a little mistake that I made.
Yeah, in many ways, it's not a job of convenience.
Yeah.
Like, we can't just do it when it's good for us.
No. Yeah, I felt horrible about that. I honestly haven't even really shared that story that much up until now. So, but, hopefully, I obviously have grown from that and realized, like, it was a terrible thing to do. But, yeah. Have you ever lost your passion for the fire service? And if you did, what'd you do to get it back? And then what do you do to keep it?
Yeah, once again, Chief Rhodes, perfect answer. Lost passion for the department that they were on? Yeah, possibly. When I kept thinking about that question, though, passion is, it's emotion, and I think basing something on emotion is not always going to be the most stable thing. So I think it's very normal. Like, it's going to ebb and flow. The one thing that popped in my head when I was thinking about this question was, have I ever lost my passion? It's the article, and I've had to read it like a bunch of times in the last couple of months. Is the 30 Years for 30 Seconds by Nick Bleedine. It's a fire engineering article. You can Google it. And basically talks about, like, what we do day in and day out at the fire for our job. And we, like, I take like that, every day you come in and you check your air pack. You check your air pack in meticulously, because that could be the day, that one day, that if we are, for that 30-second event, could be the difference between us making a difference for someone else or not, And so, like, to me, your passion is going to ebb and flow. It's an emotion. It's going to happen. But what can't is your discipline. The discipline for doing the things that we need to do every day to be ready for that one event that we may get in our career. And like, I think about, like, you had Alex Nunes on. He got to make a grab at a fire, and we all trained for that day. And some of us are going to get to do that, and other of us will never get to do that. So it's like, I go to a job that, like, I have to be ready for the thing that probably won't happen. But, like, is that a good explanation to tell the person inside the room, well, I didn't think this was going to happen today, ever. So, like, I didn't prepare appropriately. So It's we do it for them, and we embrace the monotony of the discipline of doing the job the right way, even when we don't want to, even when like our heart's not in it, we still need to go through those steps to make sure we're ready for them. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, you need to take a break. And one of the things that's given me a different breath of air is um, being an NIPSA instructor and surrounding myself with like-minded people. My wife's told me that NIPSA can sometimes be like my Disneyland, where I just, like I am with my tribe, the people that, like if I had, the guy that didn't want to train, the guy that doesn't want to train doesn't exist in the instructor room at NIPSA. They're all those guys. So I think finding like-minded people, whether it's through a fire academy, through a Fools group, through FDIC, whatever, I think is so important to find people that kind of read your mail and keep you engaged, because you're not going to always get your batteries charged from the same place, and a lot of times it's going to drain you. But to put 30 plus years in a place of dedicated service, I mean that's a lot. And I don't think we recognize that as a fire service, what that really, what they're what can be taken from you. And so like, yeah, you got to look for other ways that get you fired up. So training's a good one, and then surrounding yourself with like-minded people will keep you in the game.
Yeah. One of these days, I'm going to upgrade, well, maybe not soon, but my background, and I'm going to get a neon sign that says, surround yourself with awesome people. And I don't even mean that as a dig or a joke that everyone says it, but it is the fucking truth, and everyone
Yeah,
needs to hear that all the time. And it's so easy to forget it. It's so easy to forget it. But
yeah,
how important it is, and I always appreciate people that echo that. Find your tribe. Talk to people
hmm
that like you. Like, those are
yeah,
all great things. So, uh,
absolutely, for
awesome,
sure.
awesome answer to the question. If you were going to give someone a sense of how fire service culture should work by meeting one person, who would it be?
I couldn't think of one. I couldn't think of one, and so I'm going to go back to the Nipster Instructor Lounge. In the 13 years that I've worked at NIPSA, I've been blessed to be around people like Jimmy Theobald and Alex Nunez, um, you know, uh, Mike Fox, Duvall, Ross Chapman. You're a lot of guests that you've actually had
I
on
know
here.
what a I wonder what.
Yeah, I mean but I mean like just two awesome dudes. Figured like Larry McCormick, Kenny Korver, you know, Greek from Displays, Sammy Foster, Ryan Hughes. The list just goes on. And what I would do was, if someone wanted to know what the fire service is about, I'd sit them at that table. And you know, how can you not be a better person like listening to Cliff Gardner or Kelly Burns talk about like life on the squad in the city, and the things that they did, and the most humble people that you'll ever meet. And I say that because I still remember there was a party. It was a retirement party that I brought. I think I was married. I think we were married at the time, and I brought my wife to the party, and it was a bunch of NIPSA instructors, and she had no idea who she was talking to the whole time. And like this would have been like, to me, like the who's of the fire service. Like, and it's the same stuff that we hear time and time again. You meet Bobby Hoff, and it's just like he's just a fireman, just
Yeah.
a normal dude. And I've been lucky to surround myself with people that are very similar to who he is, and over 13 years being there. So that's where I'd bring him. I'd bring him because you can't meet a Mike Bronk that basically was forced to retire at 65 years old, with I think 40 some years of service, and he was told he had to leave, and that guy still comes in. He's the happiest guy in the world to be around firefighters, and like, how can you not love the job, being around people like that, and not be fired up? And we could only be so lucky as if after we put our time in on this job that we still have the same outlook and perspective as that man, and it's just a bunch of guys that just want to give back to the job that gave them a lot. And I'm just very blessed and thankful for them because I think, we talked about early mentors. Those are current mentors that keep me from professionally spinning out,
Yeah.
and just good people, fantastic people.
Yeah, it'd be cool to plop a microphone on that table, right? Man, that'd be something else for sure.
Leaf button would have to.
Well, yeah, but luckily I don't have any sponsors, and I'm too small where
Yep.
nobody cares if I swear, so it works out
There
pretty
you
well.
go. Yep.
All right, last one. What's the best part of the job?
Yeah. Best part of the job, I got two things. It's the people. It's the people that we get to work with, and the people we get to work for. Because they're the reason that we have a job, and then there's nothing better than coming back to that kitchen table and being around people that uh, that's my my second family. They know more of my craziness than maybe some of my own family does. They see me in a different way and more often than like my mom and my brother now, and things like that. So uh, I think that the people are some of the best parts of the job. And then I think the other best part of the job is actually when we get to do the job, when we get to do actual like the things that we've trained for, and then that's pretty awesome. And being suburban firefighters, we don't get to do it very often, but when we do, I mean, there's not a lot of feelings like it,
Yeah.
uh, like the whether it's uh, after doing a job well done and the soreness, all the sleepless night or whatever, when you actually got to do something cool, it's like there's days that you just don't feel like you're walking on air for a couple days, and that's pretty awesome. So those are my favorite things about the job.
Yeah, awesome answer. Well, with that, that's going to make 45 episodes. And Pete, I really do thank you for coming on. Awesome conversation. If anyone wanted to get a hold of you and maybe wanted more information about things that you were talking about or whatever it might be, how could they get a hold of you?
Sure. I think probably just email is always good. So pete.m.menching@gmail. Not opposed to phone calls or text messages. So you can have my phone number 847-815-7271. But I'm over at NIPSA. I'm over at Northbrook. Stop in, say hi, whatever. I like talking to firemen, so it's always good.
Yeah,
So
awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll catch everyone on the next one. So thanks again, Pete.
all right, thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it.